What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name's CJ. This is Out of Bounds, and on today's video, we're going to be doing a first look at the PrizePicks board for NBA tonight. Not going to do single stats today. No, we're going to switch it up, take it old school, and do fantasy scores. We're going to look at some fantasy matchups here that might make a lot of sense for taking the over or taking the under on. So definitely stay tuned for that. I just want to thank everybody out there who tunes into the channel daily. We have surpassed 800 subscribers. I appreciate you guys subscribing and turning on those notifications so you don't miss any of my content when it drops. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. There's still about 45% of you out there who watch these videos daily who have not subscribed. I'd appreciate if you hit that subscribe button and definitely hit those notifications so you don't miss any of my content. Now, without further ado, we've got a pretty decent size NBA slate to talk about. And as I mentioned, we're doing fantasy scores. We're going back to the fantasy scores. Somebody in the comments yesterday, a gentleman by the name of Tony, requested that we do some fantasy scores. Well, Tony, I heard your comment and here is my response. This video is for you today. So without further ado, we're going to kick things off by talking some player news. We got Clint Capella with a hand injury, but he's going to be available for the Atlanta Hawks today. Jamal Murray knee has been added to the Nuggets injury report for Tuesday, so keep an eye on Jamal Murray. If he's out, that could mean big things for the Denver Nuggets. Zion Williamson with a thumb injury remains uncertain for the Pelicans. Brandon Ingram also dealing with an injury. He's questionable for the Pelicans as well, so that would be two big pieces of the New Orleans Pelicans starting lineup out potentially. Andre Drummond, of course, he had a toenail issue with the Los Angeles Lakers. He's questionable to play versus the Raptors. Looks like Giannis Antetokounmpo, dealing with a little bit of a knee injury, is expected to be back today for the Milwaukee Bucks. Big get for them. Fred VanVleet has been ruled out with a hip injury for the Raptors, so no Fred VanVleet, no Patrick McCaw. They're also missing Kyle Lowry, so they're going to be pretty short-handed. Expect bumps up for both Pascal Siakam and Gary Trent Jr. James Harden, he suffered a hamstring injury, which impacted a lot of the Kyrie Irving underplays, fantasy points, three-point shots, and all that stuff. Otherwise, I don't think there's a ton of other injury news here that is pertinent to today's NBA slate, so we can go ahead and close that out and start looking at some fantasy projections. Now, the site that I'm using today is numberfire.com. It's totally free. They've got free fantasy projections. They also do single stat projections. I've featured them in the video before. I just want to show you guys how you can go and do all this stuff on your own at zero cost to you. You don't have to go pay one of these expensive websites for premium access, premium tools, if you don't want to. Now, sometimes it's helpful because it saves you a lot of time and it gives you a lot of good information. But in this case, this video will show you how you can go and just look at projections and compare them to PrizePicks and so on. So the first thing we're going to do is use this little best defense versus position matchups feature over on NumberFire. Now, what this does essentially is allows you to look at which players on today's NBA slate have the best matchups. So I've got it sorted right now by position. You can go point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center, however you want to do it. In this case, we're going to be looking at point guard. So the first guy that really stands out is going to be Trae Young. His DVP is a good one today. He's facing off against the New Orleans Pelicans, who might be shorthanded. No Zion, no Brandon Ingram. So maybe this is a good spot here for Trae Young to do well. So let's find Trae Young on today's board. And you can see that he is projected at 43 fantasy points. This game against New Orleans tips off at 7:40 p.m. tonight. So at 43 fantasy points, Trae Young is projected for 44.1. So according to the NumberFire projections, they like the over for Trae Young on this 43 fantasy points. Now, what we can do, take things a step further here, is we can control click, or if you're on a Mac, command click on Trae Young's name. That'll open up a new tab in whatever browser you're using. Now from there, you click on this little daily fantasy button. Clicking on that button allows you to see a recent game log for Trae Young and see how he's been performing. Now, scroll down a little bit, you can see that this says past, which is what we want to look at. We move it over to the side a little bit, and then we can go back and get a little recap of his last 5 games and how he's been performing on a 43 fantasy point projection. So you can see in the 5th game back against the Golden State Warriors, he drops 43.1 fantasy points, which would put him over 43. So that's good for an over. You've got an under against Denver at 36.5. 46.9 against Phoenix puts him well over. 44.4 puts him over against San Antonio. And then finally his last matchup against Golden State, only 15.9 fantasy points, putting him way under. So just to recap, he's got 3 games in his recent game logs where he's went over 43. He's got 2 games where he's went under. So the over looking like the way to go on Trae Young on most nights here. So hope that helps you out. So you got a glimpse of Trae Young in his DVP. You got a glimpse of how he's done in his last 5 games. One other thing that I would consider is looking at the game totals and spread, because that's going to be a key thing to consider when you're looking to take the over on anyone. Now, you could do that here on Number Fire. They've got this handy little toolbar across the top. You could see that this game has an implied total of 228.5 points. So that is the total for the Pelicans, the total for the Hawks combined together. That's where you get that implied total from. And you can see that Atlanta is a 3.5 point favorite at that minus 3.5. Now, what that means is that this game has a pretty close spread, that it should stay close, competitive. Doesn't look like it's going to be a blowout, which is good news. I will caution you, though, that if Zion and Ingram are both out for New Orleans, I expect this spread to get bigger, meaning that there could be a greater chance that the Atlanta Hawks end up blowing out the New Orleans Pelicans. So there you have it for Trae Young. We're going to do this again for a couple of other players. Let's see what other point guards are jumping out on the Number Fire DVP matchups. So you got Patrick Beverley. He's in a good spot. Let's see if he's on the PrizePicks board at the moment. I am not seeing Patrick Beverley. Nope, no Patrick Beverley. Eric Bledsoe, he's in a pretty good spot, especially if there's no Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram. Let's see if they've got Bledsoe up here on the board today. Not seeing any Eric Bledsoe at the moment. So I think they're kind of holding off, trying to wait and see on some of these guys. Steph Curry, do they have him up on the board yet? Not seeing any Steph Curry. Damian Lillard, let's talk Dame. All right, we could do Damian Lillard. He's in a pretty decent spot here. The matchup against the Los Angeles Clippers. Clippers ranking 18th against point guards. So a little bit of a plus matchup. It's not middle of the road, but very close to kind of an average matchup for him. Now, the projection for Damian Lillard, according to Number Fire, is 44.7 points. Now, that puts him a couple of points over his PrizePicks projection of 42. So, with that in mind, we could take a closer look at Damian Lillard and see how he's been performing. Again, Control-click or Command-click on his name. It opens up a new tab. And then with that tab open, you can click on his daily fantasy button here. Scroll on down a little bit, scroll to the side a little bit, and then we'll dial it back and look at his last 5 games and see how he's been performing. So against Miami, 40.1, that puts him under 42. 40.1, that puts him under 42. 53, big over there. 53, another big over there. And then finally 34 in his last game, which was against the Oklahoma City Thunder. So you could see in his last 5 games, just to recap for you guys, 3 games of going under, 2 games where he's went over 42. The Portland Trail Blazers are finally starting to get healthy again. You're not really seeing as big of performances as you have in the past from Damian Lillard with CJ McCollum back in the mix. Of course, they traded for Norman Powell, so that's another guy who's getting more touches, more usage in this offense. So not seeing as many big games for Damian Lillard. Now, with that in mind, we can look at the game totals and spread here. So if we click NBA View All, you can see all of the games that pop up here. We'll scroll to the side. We'll find this Portland game. And there you have it. Portland, LA Clippers has a total of 229 implied points with the Clippers as 6-point favorites. So wouldn't call this one a blowout. I would say that it is going to be probably like orange for me in terms of blowout risk or blowout potential, meaning it could blow out, but Hopefully, Portland is able to kind of keep things close throughout the majority of this game. But pretty good totals. Spread, a little worrisome. So there you have it for Damian Lillard. Now, with that in mind, we're going to switch things up. We're going to go from point guard over to shooting guard and see what DVP matchups really stand out. Who are guys that are in good matchups? And the first one that's standing out to me is Paul George. Now, Paul George is projected at 40 over on PrizePicks. He is at 39.3 over on NumberFire. So they expect him to go under ever so slightly, but this is such a close call, guys. This is such a close projection that I wouldn't put too much weight into going under on Paul George. I think we should look into things a little bit more before we rush to judgment on him. So again, we'll just kind of do a control click on his name. A new tab pops up. Click Daily Fantasy, scroll on down just a little bit here, and then we'll scroll on over just a little bit here, and then we could go back to his 5th game in his game log, which was against the San Antonio Spurs, where he puts up 32.2 fantasy points, putting him as a big under there. He goes over in the rematch against San Antonio, 57.3, huge over here against Philadelphia, 32.1 and 29.1. So 2 big unders to go to cap off his last 5 games. So in his last 5 overall, you could see that he's got 3 unders, 2 overs. So the under has been the way to go on Paul George more often than not in his recent game logs. And then we've already kind of talked a little bit about the game total and spread for this one. As we mentioned, the Clippers are pretty big favorites in this one at a 6-point favorite. And to me, that kind of leads to a potential blowout. But yeah, I would just be very careful with the way that Paul George's recent game logs look, and the fact that this one could get away from the Portland Trailblazers and end up being a Clippers blowout. Well, yeah, I would probably lean toward the under on Paul George. So there you have it on him. Now let's head back to the DVP page and see if there's anyone else that's really jumping out. We got Kevin Herter. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I don't know if they have him up on the board. They do not. They have Bogdanovich up instead. Lou Williams, he is up on the board. Lemon Pepper Lou, he is back in Atlanta. We haven't talked about him in a long time on the channel, so let's talk about him right now. The DVP, this matchup looks fantastic for him facing the New Orleans Pelicans. Again, this game tips off at 7:40 p.m. Pelicans, they rank just 25th against opposing shooting guards like Lou Williams. So as you can see, his projection on PrizePicks is 20. He is projected for 22.7 over on NumberFire. So with that in mind, the over looking like the way to go for Sweet Lou. But we're going to get into some more of his recent game logs here and see how he's been performing. Now, we dial it back to his 5th game in his game log. Now, of course, this was against Atlanta. This was before he joined the Atlanta Hawks, so we can't include that one, but we'll look at his last 4 instead. You can see that against San Antonio, just 20 points there, which would put him actually as a push based on today's projection. 15.9 puts him under. Huge game, and this was actually against the New Orleans Pelicans, so something to keep in mind as he's facing the Pelicans again tonight, obviously. Put up a monster over there with 40.8 points. And then finally against Golden State in his last game back on April 4th, 22.6, which is still good enough for an over. So all in all, his last few games here, he's went over in 2 of them and under in 1 and push in 1. So over in 2, 1 push, and 1 under. There you have it for Lou Williams. Now, again, the game total for this one, we talked about it a little bit with the Hawks and Pelicans. It looks good so far at 228.5 implied points with Atlanta, just a 3.5-point favorite. Things definitely could change, though. Again, you got to pay attention to the injury news, because if New Orleans is without their top 2 players in Zion and Brandon Ingram, that's going to change the whole shakeup of this game. So there you have it for Lou Williams. Now, we're going to look at the next position, which is going to be small forward. So let's do that now. So we can switch this from shooting guard to small forward. And then as you can see, the DVP ranks here on the right-hand side. Saddiq Bey is the guy that is jumping out, looking like he is in a good matchup. Let's see if they've got him up on the PrizePicks board. They do. He is at 21 fantasy points. So at 21 fantasy points on PrizePicks, they've got him at 22.6 over on NumberFire, meaning they like him to go over by almost 2 points, 1 to 2 points. So with that in mind, this matchup against Denver, the game tips off at 9:10 p.m. over on PrizePicks. Let's get into his recent game logs and see what he's been up to. Click his daily fantasy button there. We'll scroll on down and then we'll scroll on over. And you can see that in his last 5 games, he's been up and down, a definite roller coaster ride with Saddiq Bey. Against the Raptors, he goes over with 28.6, 7.8 goes under, 20.3 under, 7.5 under, and 16.6 under. So based on the 21 fantasy point projection that he's got today, he's went under in 4 games and over in just 1. So maybe it's not as up and down as it seems, but you can kind of see that there's a little pattern. Pretty good game, bad game. Better game, bad game, and then he bounces back with another good game. So in this one, if you believe in believe in patterns, I should say, it would be expected for him to have a bad game here. But the matchup does look good. Let's not get too crazy here. The matchup is good on paper, and he is projected to go over this 21 fantasy point number. Now, with that in mind, let's look at the game totals and spread for this Detroit-Denver game. So if we scroll on over here, we can find this game here. Obviously, Denver, a big, long, athletic team. They are difficult to score on. I mean, they've got, obviously, Jokic. Then you've got Porter Jr. You've got Aaron Gordon in the mix now. You got Will Barton. Jamal Murray, he might not play, but, I mean, you could see that this team is very talented, very large team. The totals for this game, though, 214.5 points. Denver, a massive, massive 12-point favorite in this one. So this one doesn't look like it's going to stay close at all. This is definitely a red warning for you. This game's going to blow out. I mean, Denver is just way better. They're the much, much better team against Detroit. And I wouldn't be surprised if they just said, hey, Jamal, you can have the night off. We're not going to need you tonight. This is the Detroit Pistons we're playing against. So that could impact Saddiq Bey's final output in terms of fantasy points. So there you have it for Saddiq Bey. Let's see if we got any other guys here in decent matchups. We got Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Buckets. He is facing off against the Memphis Grizzlies tonight. The Grizzlies rank just 26 in the entire league against opposing small forwards. So Jimmy Butler's in a pretty good spot. Let's find him on the board. He's projected at 45 fantasy points today. And at 45 fantasy points, NumberFire's got him going for 44.1, meaning they favor the under on Jimmy Butler. Now, with that in mind, we can click Jimmy Butler's name, head on over to his daily fantasy numbers, and get a look at his game logs and see how he's been doing in his last few. All right, so we hit the last 5 game mark, and at Charlotte, he actually had 41.5 points. Great total, but not good enough to go over 45. So that's an under. Now he comes back with 44, putting him under 45. 37 would put him under. 52.2. Finally, we get an over for Jimmy Butler. And then in his last game against Cleveland, 43.7. So in his last 5 games, he's got some good games in there, but they're not 45 or more fantasy point good. He's only got 1 over in his last 5, and he's got 4 under. So 1 over, 4 under in his last 5. So things are looking like an under for Jimmy Butler here based on the projections and based on the game logs. And finally, we're going to look at the game totals and spread here. So if we click this little NBA View All button, we can scroll on over here and see that this Miami Heat game versus Memphis, Miami is the 5.5 point favorite. Game totals aren't very high here, just 216 points. So on 216 points and a spread that's 5.5, I'd probably put that in the yellow range in terms of blowout risk. I would probably lean toward the under on Jimmy Butler too here. I know the matchup's good, but man, he hasn't been performing at a 45 or more fantasy point level in his last few games here. So I think he has a good game. I don't think he has a game that puts him over the top of 45. So I'm leaning toward the under here. There you have it. All right, now that Jimmy Butler is in the books, Kelly Oubre, do we want to talk Kelly Oubre? I guess we can. He is projected for 32 fantasy points. He's facing the Milwaukee Bucks tonight at 10:10 p.m. Now, Kelly Oubre is in a very good DVP spot here, meaning that the Milwaukee Bucks are the 24th worst team in the league against opposing small forwards like Kelly Oubre. And I guess you could throw Andrew Wiggins in there too. So Kelly Oubre on the projection of 32 on PrizePicks, he's at 27.4 over on NumberFire. So they like him to go under by quite a bit here. He's actually a pretty big under on that projection. So let's look into Oubre's recent game logs and kind of get an idea of what he's been up to. All right, so you can see his 5th game back is where we will start. Against the Atlanta Hawks, he goes for 33.2, which puts him over. 34.2, putting him over. 15.3 would put him under. 16.9, again, not even close, puts him way under. And then finally, his last game, which was against Atlanta, a monster, 50 burger for Kelly Oubre Jr. So you can see that, it's been a little mixed bag here. He's not a consistent guy. He's not hitting over 32 fantasy points with any regularity. It's been up, it's been down. And, makes it kind of hard to trust Kelly Oubre and project or predict what he's going to do in today's game. So with that in mind, let's look at the totals for this Golden State Milwaukee game. They're going to be one of the later games. You can see that the game totals are fantastic. 237.5 total points here. Loving that. Now, what I'm not loving is the fact that Golden State might potentially be blown out in this game. It is a 6.5 point spread. Golden State is on the wrong end of that number. So Kelly Oubre, you're going to have to hope that he gets it done here. Maybe he plays late minutes. He's still a fairly young player. Usually with the veteran guys, they'll rest him late in blowout situations. But yeah, I just don't trust Kelly Oubre here. There's probably better places to go and other guys to look at. So he won't be a play for me, I don't think. But if I were to play him, I guess give me the under. Give me the under. I mean, I don't know. I'm just not getting a good read or a good feel for it. So there you have it for Kelly Oubre. Now, let's move things over to power forward and see if there's any decent plays that we can look at there. That is the wrong page. There we go. And we've got the likes of Paul Millsap, Aaron Gordon, JaMychal Green, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Bobby Portis, Thaddeus Young, Lauri Markkanen, and Markieff Morris all up in very good spots here. Anything that's in green is good. Green is good here. So with that in mind, let's see if AG is on the board. My former favorite Orlando Magic player, or one of my favorites, he is now a Denver Nugget and seems to be very happy about it. Good for him, but we don't miss you. It's King Chuma Okeke season in Orlando. So good riddance, Aaron Gordon. But anyway, at 30 fantasy points, they've got him projected to go for 27.1 here, which would make him in under by, 3 points almost. So the under looking like the way to go on Aaron Gordon so far. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to get into more about Aaron Gordon. There he is in his Orlando Magic jersey. RIP, Aaron Gordon as an Orlando Magic player. Let's scroll over to the side here and see how he's been performing in his last 5 games. So 29.9, that was against Phoenix. Decent output, but not good enough for an over. That would be an under. Here's another under, 44.2 and 40.4 in his last 2 games. Man, he's been heating up. And if there's no Jamal Murray, I think that the usage goes to guys like Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., obviously Jokic, Barton, the other guys in the starting lineup will soak up a lot of that usage. So the way that Aaron Gordon's been playing in his last 5 games, he has went over in 2 of them by quite a bit and under in the remaining 3. So the over could be a good play here based on how he's done in his last 2 games. All right. Now against this Detroit team, we've already talked about this is a massive, massive blowout type of game. The totals and spread, it's very worrisome here. Obviously, Denver, 12-point favorites. They're going to probably crush this Detroit team with or without Jamal Murray. So be very careful when playing Aaron Gordon or any of the stars from this game. If you can get them in a first half only format, that's the way I would go, because the blowouts can be the #1 killer for full game fantasy points or any of the full game single stat stuff. So just be very cautious when rostering anybody from this Denver-Detroit game. Probably just sticking to first half onlys here. All right, with Aaron Gordon in the books, we can start talking Giannis Antetokounmpo. As I mentioned at the top of the show, he has been dealing with a knee injury, but he looks like he's going to be returning for the Milwaukee Bucks tonight, and he's in a great spot against Golden State here. We've already talked high game totals, fairly decent spread, so this could be one where Giannis Antetokounmpo just absolutely destroys. Now, he's at 54 fantasy points over on PrizePicks. They got him at 54.8 on NumberFire. So now that we know that, we can click into his name here and get a better idea of what he may do in this matchup. And the way that we're going to do that is the way that we're going to do, the way that we've done the other players, by looking at their recent game logs. So you can see in his last 5, 34.1 against Boston, terrible. 31.1 against Boston, terrible. 44.7, better, but not nearly close enough to go over 54. 43, good, but not great. That's another under. And then finally, he bounces back in a major way against the Portland Trail Blazers, dropping 72.4 fantasy points. So in his last 5 games, he's got just 1 over based on today's 54 fantasy points. So 1 over and 4 unders is not looking great here for Giannis Antetokounmpo. I'm probably leaning toward the under. I know the game totals are high. I know the spread is somewhat close, somewhat competitive. And I know it doesn't feel good taking the under on a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo, but he's got Drew Holiday there. He's got Chris Middleton there. I mean, he's got pieces around him. DiVincenzo, where he doesn't have to take on as much of the role. Maybe he doesn't tonight. So Golden State, they've been getting blown out. Not a very good basketball team this season. This one could turn into a massive blowout. If you're feeling a different type of way about Giannis Antetokounmpo, I understand. It's hard to take the under on a guy in a full game format. Take him in a first half format, take the over. That can always be a way to go too. So there you have it for Giannis. We can take a look now at a different position. We'll recap or cap things off with the center position and look at a couple of guys who might be in good spots there. We got Miles Turner against this Chicago Bulls team. He'll be facing off against Nikola Vucevic. Boy, do I miss Vuce. He was the heart and soul, the backbone of the Orlando Magic franchise for so long. He is no longer with us. He has moved on, taken his talents to the Chicago Bulls. Let's take a look at Miles Turner. He is at 31 fantasy points, and I'm not seeing Vucevic on the board, which is a little oh, there he is. There he is. I just didn't recognize him in that Magic jersey. Miles Turner at 31 fantasy points. You can see his projection today is 33.4, and he is in a great matchup here. But it's going to be a little bit of a skewed matchup because you got to think about who they had there at center for most of the season in Chicago. They had Gafford at one point. They had probably Markkanen playing center at a little bit. I think probably Thaddeus Young was filling in as an undersized center for them. Wendell Carter Jr. So it's been a mixed bag. I mean, it's been a rotating door, you can say, as far as who's been manning that center position. Now it's Vucevic, and I will say that as a lifelong Magic fan, he is not the greatest defender. So there might be some room here for Miles Turner to eat in this matchup. So far, the over looking like the way to go on Miles Turner based on the NumberFire projections we have for him today. Now, if we head on over to his daily fantasy tab and we scroll to the side and we scroll down just a little bit, we can look at his last 5 game logs and get an idea at how he's been performing. So at 31 fantasy points tonight, he goes well over with 45.9. Great game for him there. 31.5 against Washington, goes over there. Comes close with 29.2 against Miami, but falls short. That's an under. 21.1 puts him under. And then he bounces back finally with another big over at 36.9. So his last 5 games have been kind of wishy-washy a little bit, but he's got 3 overs and 2 unders. So that's definitely something to consider. So with that in mind, we can look at the game totals for this one and also the spread. Now, the totals aren't bad here. 227 combined points. That's quite a few points here, and the spread is fantastic. It's just a 1-point spread, meaning this game should be competitive, should stay close for 4 quarters of basketball. I don't mind taking Miles Turner over, with the total being what it is and with the spread staying close from what it looks like so far. So there you have it. Who do you like from today's video? You guys let me know. Drop a comment down in the comment section below. Hopefully you enjoyed the fantasy points. We returned to the fantasy points. Although I must say, I do think the future of both DFS, sports betting, everything's going to go to single stat. I think fantasy point will still be around. DFS will still be around, but I don't think it'll be as big and impactful as it is now. It's just way easier to take an over or an under on somebody's like real life points, rebounds, assists, steals, stuff like that, than it is to try and like sit behind a computer or on a calculator and figure out how many fantasy points a guy needs to go over or under. So that's why I've been doing more of the single stat stuff, but hopefully you enjoyed a little bit of a throwback for today's video. So that one was for you, Tony. Thanks for tuning in, dropping that comment. You guys, this is CJ for Out of Bounds. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, and we'll catch you in the next one. Good luck tonight. Peace out.